Welcome to Lecture 3 of Unit 3. This lecture is all about igneous rocks, those rocks that form as magma cools. So, in this lecture, we're going to look at only igneous rocks. And that whole family of rocks. And the next two lectures, we'll be talking about the other types of rocks. So what we end up with is we have three factors that affect whether a rock will melt. We got to look at the temperature of the rock, the pressure of the surrounding rock, and the presence of fluids in the rock. If you think back to last unit, there were three ways in which magma forms. Either the rock melts when the temperature of the rock melts all the minerals in the rock. If you melt everything something is made out of, that thing melts. Alright, if you're trying to melt a cookie, you got to get everything in the cookie to melt, not just the chocolate chips. You got to melt everything. The second way a rock can melt is when excess pressure is removed from the rock for some reason. There's an earthquake or a fault shift, and all of a sudden there's not as much pressure in an area. You can get a lot of rock melting quickly because of this removal of excess pressure of rocks that are higher than its melting point. Now, a rock can be higher than its melting point, but stay solid if there's a lot of pressure pushing on that rock, keeping it in its solid form. And finally, the third way that magma forms, or the third way rocks melt, are when fluids such as water are added. Remember, this happens a lot at subduction zones. Where you have one plate subducting, going under another one, and oftentimes taking some seawater and other fluids with it. Now, the thing about the formation of magma is it's not as simple as it sounded on that last page. Alright? Because not all the minerals melt at the same time. Some minerals have lower melting points than others. Alright? If you had a mixture of chocolate and ice, or chocolate and ice cream, like chocolate chip ice cream. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. If you have chocolate chip ice cream, the ice cream is going to melt before the chocolate does. And what this is called partial melting. Alright, so the minerals that have lower melting points melt first, which should make sense. Again, think of chocolate chip ice cream. The ice cream will melt at a lower temperature than the chocolate, so the ice cream melts first. As the temperature keeps going up, temperature increases, other minerals melt until all of the minerals melt, and as more minerals melt, the composition of the magma changes. And this is all known as partial melting. Rocks don't instantly all melt at once. The minerals that can melt do melt, and if the temperature keeps getting higher, more and more minerals will melt, and you'll have a bigger and bigger mixture of what is in the magma. It's just a diagram showing you partial melting. You do not have to memorize the way in which the minerals melt. But if we look at this sample of an igneous rock here, you can see the little crystals. The yellow area is quartz. The gray is feldspar. The brown is biotite. And the greenish brown is hornblende. The first minerals to melt are the quartz and feldspars. Some of the grays have melted, but all of that yellow area has melted. And then as it keeps getting higher, the rest of the feldspars melt, and we're left with just hornblende and biotite, which tend to be high melting point minerals. Right? the quartz and feldspars might melt around 500 or 600 degrees Celsius, whereas hornblende and biotite might not melt until over 1,000 degrees. So it plays a role in which minerals are dissolved in the magma. Now you can have little solid chunky pieces, all right? And keep in mind, felsic magma has lots of feldspar in it. It tends to be cooler, all right? And that's part of the reason why it's sticky. It's only got quartz and feldspar, so it has these little solid chunks in it too, if there's any of those, if it's not hot enough. And because of that, that even makes the magma a little more sticky. The opposite of partial melting, and we kind of hit on this in the last one, is called fractional crystallization, which means that it crystallizes in the opposite way it melts. All right, so it is the reverse of partial melting. All right, the big thing here is the last to melt are the first to crystallize. So last to melt, first to crystallize, or first to melt, last to crystallize. It's the same thing. And really, when we're looking at fractional crystallization, instead of looking at the melting point, we are looking at the crystallization point, which we call freezing point. I know it's tough to think of something freezing at 1,000 degrees Celsius, right? Water freezes at 0 Celsius. So something freezing at 1,000 degrees seems ridiculous. But that's what rocks do. That's why we kind of call it crystallization. It makes a little more sense to us than freezing. We associate freezing with cold. So the minerals that have the highest freezing point, highest crystallization point will crystallize first. And so it's the exact opposite of partial melting. The last minerals to melt are the first to crystallize as it comes back out. So just as we had that picture of partial melting, here are similar pictures for fractional crystallization. The temperature goes down. The first things that crystallized were those feldspars that were the last ones to melt in that last picture a couple of slides ago. So again, whatever last to melt is first to crystallize. Whatever first to melt is last to crystallize, because you have to get down to the right temperature. And all of this, the melting and the crystallizing, specifically the crystallizing, leads to textures of the rocks, or what the rocks seem to look like. And it's mostly based on where the magma cools. Where the magma cools and hardens. And the first thing we can do is we can identify an igneous rock as cooling inside Earth's surface, beneath Earth's surface, called intrusive. And intrusive would be, we're going to say inside Earth. And the other one is extrusive, and this is lava solidifying, lava crystallizing at Earth's surface, or outside Earth, on the surface of the Earth. So extrusive sounds like exit, so the lava has exited the Earth. Intrusive, well, it starts with the word in, so this is all happening in the Earth, in the ground. And these textures get determined by the size of the crystals. And the size of the crystals are determined by how fast the magma cools. The cooling rate is the speed. the speed of cooling of the magma. So there are coarse-grained rocks. Rocks with large crystals. Large crystals for coarse-grained. All right, if you've ever had coursed black pepper, or you've used pepper on your eggs or your sausage or whatever you like to put pepper on, and you get large chunks of pepper, coarse-grained. Coarse is a synonym of large. So we got large-grained igneous rocks, coarse-grained igneous rocks, and they are intrusive, which means they cooled slowly inside the Earth. Why did they cool slowly? Because the Earth, inside the Earth, is surrounded by a bunch of other rocks which are insulating it. So it's warmer inside the Earth. You don't have air or water that sucks up a lot of heat really quickly. So rocks that have large, well-developed minerals, large, well-developed mineral grains, like granite, okay, you see large crystals inside the coarse-grained rocks. Those we know are intrusive and they cooled slowly. The other type are the fine-grained igneous rocks, and these are our extrusive rocks that cool rapidly or fast, and they have small grains. All right, so small grains cool quickly outside the Earth, and usually it's because the magma becomes lava because it hits the surface of the Earth. That lava is cooling in the air, which is a lot cooler than it was underground, or, in the water, which is also very cool compared to the temperature inside the ground. So small crystals are fine-grained, and fine just means small. There are a couple other textures. Sometimes magma will start to cool slowly and then cool more rapidly, so you get large crystals embedded with small crystals. You get a mixture. All right? These are called porphyritic. I don't have any easy way for you to remember that. Porphyritic, large crystals and a lot of small crystals. And we'll see examples. Next slide has some pictures. If our magma cools very, very quick, super quick, you might get very few crystals at all, and we get what is called as a glassy texture. This is obsidian, the volcanic glasses you see if it cools really, really quick. And also, speaking of lava, if that lava or magma has lots of dissolved gas, we get the vescular texture, which it has holes. It is holy rock, where the gas bubbles escaped. So here's that porphyritic. You can see you got large, big crystals, areas of large, big crystals, and then very, very fine crystals in between. Looks like there's large crystals inside this chunk of basalt here. Here's that glassy texture, that obsidian. It looks like glass. That's why it's called glassy. And finally, the vescular texture has all these little holes and bubbles in it. And then remember, intrusive, large grains, almost all the crystals are about the same size and they're pretty big. Fine-grained are extrusive, and they look like the darker gray parts of this rock here where you can't really see the mineral grains, or they're really tiny if you can. There is also another way to identify igneous rocks or to classify them besides intrusive, extrusive, porphyritic, vescular, glassy. All right, we can also look at the colors of the rocks, and this is all coming from the type of magma that the rock is. So we got felsic rock. Shockingly, felsic rock comes from felsic magma, which means it's light in color. All right, contains potassium, feldspar, and quartz, which are light-colored minerals. All right, granite and rhyolite are two of the most common felsic rocks. obsidian, what looks like black black volcanic glass. It looks black, but that's just because the light is playing a trick with your eye. If you shave a thin enough piece and shine a light through it, you'll see it's actually a light green color. It's craziness, I know. But obsidian is a felsic rock. It's a really good trick question for you on a test. And also pumice. Pumice tends to be light in color, especially from felsic rocks. Pumice has a lot of talc in it and is very soft rock sometimes. And so we also put pumice on things and then to scratch off dead skin called a pumice stone. So there you go. The felsic family of rocks. The felsic family has light-colored rocks. So felsic, light-colored. That's the big connection there. If you see a lot of light colors, you got felsic. The other type, mafic rock from mafic magma. Alright, so it's rich in magnesium and iron, just like mafic magma is, and it's dark in color. The common ones are basalt, which you've seen in class. It was that dark gray that you guys liked to call bath salts and then laughed about when we did the density lab. That is basalt. That is the oceanic crust. And then a dark granite, and I think it gets sold at the stores as dark granite, but really it's a mafic rock called gabbro. So instead of having those that light gray color with a couple of dark speckles, it has a dark color, dark gray or black color with some lighter colored speckles or some red speckles and orange speckles in it instead. Alright, and these have the plagioclase, feldspar, pyroxenes. You don't really need to know the exact minerals, but you should know that basalt and gabbro are mafic. And mafic are dark color, just like mafic magma was darker magma. Then, of course, because everything's not so simple as light or dark, there are the intermediate families of rock. The intermediate family, they contain a mixture of both. It's a blend of felsic and mafic. Alright, diorite and andesite are the two common members of the intermediate family. You might not know what they look like or be able to see them. Don't really expect me to just show you a rock and say, hey, is this diorite or andesite? Yeah, I'm not going to do that, all right? I might show you two rocks and say, okay, which one's basalt, which one is granite. And basalt and granite are quite different than each other. Basalt, fine-grained, mostly dark. Granite, large-grained, very light in color. So that kind of stuff. Yes, these intermediate ones, I just want you to know that they're there. And that is it for this lecture. Our next couple of lectures are on the metamorphic and sedimentary rocks. I am blanking right now on which one we are going to do first, so you kind of get to find that out as we go along. And as always, if you have any questions, I hope you wrote them down or are writing them down right now, so you can come ask myself or Mr. Hughes in class tomorrow, or whenever your next class is. And if you come up with any between now and then, please ask them. Asking questions is the best way to get questions answered. And if you have a question, chances are you're not the only one with that question. So that makes it really easy to answer it for a bunch of people. Have a good night, and we'll see you in class.